What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to offer my spoiler-free review of Wes Anderson's latest movie, The French Dispatch, a movie that was supposed to come out in July of 2020, but then the whole world turned upside down and exploded, and you know the rest. At any rate, it is finally getting a proper release on October 22nd, so let me tell you all about it. Inspired by Wes Anderson's love of the magazine The New Yorker, a magazine that I must admit I'm largely unfamiliar with, apart from a few political cartoons from the late 90s and early 2000s, but that is neither here nor there. The French Dispatch is an anthology movie that's basically a love letter to journalists, featuring a variety of eccentric characters working in the fictional French town of Ennui, which is the French outpost for a fictional American magazine that was started in Kansas. At the core of the story is Arthur Howitzer Jr., played by Bill Murray, who from the 1920s through the 1970s has been the editor of the French Dispatch, protecting and nurturing a wide array of talented contributors, and the death of his character prompts a look back at some of the most famous stories in the magazine's history, namely the three short films that make up the heart of this anthology. These three short films are a dazzling display of Wes Anderson's wide range of filmmaking techniques, starring one of the best casts that he's ever assembled. And if you're already a Wes Anderson diehard, reviews are kind of pointless. You're in. You're all the way in. The only question is where you're going to rank it out of his 10 feature films, which I'll get to at the end of my review. But for folks who've enjoyed his movies in the past but might be on the fence, I'll say this. The French Dispatch will stimulate your imagination, your intellect, your curiosity, but not necessarily your emotions. The movie's absolutely delightful, in particular the first short starring Benicio del Toro and Léa Seydoux, which was far and away my favorite of the three. But anthology films in general, they always struggle with this problem of being consistently strong from start to finish. The biggest hurdle that all of them face, but none of them ever fully conquers, is the emotional reset that takes place in between each story, where the audience has to basically cleanse their palate and kind of start over with a fresh set of characters. But in the case of The French Dispatch, the problem's compounded by the fact that late period Wes Anderson movies are already a little cold and distant on an emotional level. While I'm always there opening day and I always admire his movies, I always enjoy his movies, but increasingly they're starting to feel like I'm stepping inside the world's most exotic collection of esoterica ever assembled by a human being, rather than getting emotionally immersed in a human story. And there are exceptions, of course, like Ray Fiennes' character in Grand Budapest Hotel, but in general, over the last 10 years, I've found that the one critical flaw in Anderson's movies is a lack of emotional stakes. Because early on, Wes Anderson would have these little moments like Bill Murray saying, "She's my Rushmore," or the death of Buckley in Royal Tenenbaums, or even in Bottle Rocket, where you have a scene where we might be laughing while Future Man makes fun of Dignan. All the same, we're feeling this deep swell of pity for the character.
He looks like a little banana. Where are you from anyway, man?
I'm from around here.
This guy used to mow our lawn.
No shit.
Yeah, he was great. Clipping the hedges, sweeping up, mowing the lawn. What was the name of your little lawn mowing company?
The Lawn Wranglers?
That kind of heart is largely gone from Wes Anderson's recent crop of movies, even if his technical mastery and artistry continue to evolve in jaw-dropping ways. And speaking of which, this latest movie is a masterclass in visual storytelling, with Wes Anderson going absolutely berserk with different aspect ratios, animation, black and white. It might be his busiest, most experimental film yet. And at this point, I'm not sure there's anything that he can't do with a movie camera. But as stimulating as this movie was to look at, I have to strike one final word of caution. I worry that in the years to come, Wes Anderson will increasingly get so lost inside the worlds that he creates, playing with his toys as it were, that his movies will feel increasingly niche, perhaps even skippable outside of his core audience, people like myself who will watch everything he makes until he retires. I've been watching his movies for the last 25 years. I will gladly keep watching his movies for the next 25 years. But I don't think a movie like The French Dispatch is going to build him a larger audience or a new audience. Now contrast that with a movie like Rushmore, which made Wes Anderson this rock star director, one of the voices of his generation. A lot of new fans jumped on board with that movie after having overlooked or just simply disregarded Bottle Rocket. Or think of a movie like Fantastic Mr. Fox, which for me signaled this really bold new direction in his career, recharging his creative batteries and making his work feel so fresh and new again. The French Dispatch, it's really good, but what it lacks are those qualities that will persuade new people to get on board and devour his work for the first time. Or maybe I'm just being too harsh. I'm always getting complaints on this channel that I only make videos about movies that I love, but there it is. I managed to criticize the filmmaker that I've been obsessed with since the late 90s. But without giving anything away, let's talk a little bit about the three short films that make up The French Dispatch. And the films are called The Concrete Masterpiece, Revisions of a Manifesto, and The Private Dining Room of the Police Commissioner. Each of these three stories unfolds from the point of view of the journalist covering the story, namely Tilda Swinton, Frances McDormand, and Jeffrey Wright. And I have zero complaints about any of their performances. They all absolutely nailed it. I just happen to prefer Tilda's story, probably because of a natural bias. She is one of my favorite actors working today. It also helps that this first short film is all about my two favorite subjects, art and sex. In this case, an amazing way in which the two topics overlap. Benicio del Toro plays this psychotic killer facing life in prison, whose muse and lover is a security guard played by Léa Seydoux. She regularly poses for him in the nude in all of her glory as he creates a series of masterpieces that set the art world on fire. Now, Léa Seydoux, she's never been shy. I mean, she made blues the warmest color after all. And as far as I'm concerned, if you look as great as she does, flaunt it, baby, flaunt it. And then you have Tilda Swinton's character, who's this hysterical mix of American Midwest charm and European sophistication. And as the reporter for this wild story, she just had me eating out of the palm of her hand every step of the way. So while I probably won't be rewatching this entire movie over and over again, this short, on the other hand, I'm going to be watching on repeat for many years to come. And as I said before, I was less interested in the second and third shorts, but if you're a fan of Timothée Chalamet, you're in for a real treat. He really seems to get the Wes Anderson flavor, and I hope they make many more movies together. And the section starring Timothée Chalamet is all about the student protests in Paris in the late 60s, and if you're a fan of late 60s Godard, in particular movies like Masculine Feminine, which I think is one of his best, there are a couple of scenes I feel like a really loving homage to the Jean-Luc Godard of like 1967, 1968, and he even includes one of the songs from the soundtrack of Masculine Feminine. And along those lines, for all you classic French cinema fans out there, if you're a fan of the films of Jacques Tati, well, let's just say you're going to be delighted by several shots in this flick. And as the star of the final short, Jeffrey Wright, he really nailed it as well. He can kind of do no wrong right now, and he's enjoying one of those hot streaks that is rapidly granting him the status of a living legend. And he shares this beautiful scene with Bill Murray that's particularly good, that probably comes the closest to making a tear come to one's eyes. Also, I'm an animation junkie, and this last short featured some really fun animation sequences that kind of feel like a New Yorker cover come to life, so that was a ton of fun to watch. Now, once upon a time, Wes Anderson was known for his comedy, less so these days ever since he stopped writing scripts with Owen Wilson. Nowadays, he prefers writing with people like Roman Coppola and Jason Schwartzman, both of whom made contributions to this movie, but I think neither Roman Coppola nor Jason Schwartzman have been good for Wes Anderson's funny bone. The French Dispatch features the kind of mild comedy that makes one smile or giggle or politely applaud, but I do miss the days where Wes Anderson's movies would have me rolling on the floor, screaming with laughter, holding my side in pain. But also, you have to keep in mind what age I was when I first got into Wes Anderson's work. I saw Bottle Rocket on VHS at age 20 and then Rushmore at age 22 in the theater. And for college kids at that time, Rushmore was just like a cultural H-bomb that just made people go movie crazy. And then a few years later, the Royal Tenenbaums came along and confirmed that Wes Anderson was a major new distinctive talent. And my siblings and I, we still quote that movie constantly to each other to this day. So long story short, if you were a film freak at the time where Wes Anderson burst onto the scene, it was almost impossible not to get swept up in the tornado of love for his movies. So how does The French Dispatch compare to the rest? Let's rank them. Okay, so for this list, I'm going to leave out as many amazing short films, and I do like his short films quite a bit, but I would start with The Darjeeling Limited for my number 10, and I have to admit, I don't really like that movie at all, apart from its brilliant first scene, all to the tune of This Time Tomorrow by the Kinks. But then at number 9, I have Isle of Dogs, then The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, Moonrise Kingdom, and then for my number 6, I'm going to go with The French Dispatch, Hey, Hey, Hey. And then for my number 5, I'll say Grand Budapest Hotel, then Fantastic Mr. Fox, then the Holy Trinity of Bottle Rocket, Rushmore, and finally for my number 1, the Royal Tenenbaums, a position that I think is unlikely ever to change. But I don't think I can really go any further without giving a ton of stuff away. So once again, the movie's release is just around the corner, October 22nd. So I hope everyone out there enjoys the movie and that it lives up to your expectations. But thanks so much for listening to my review, and please remember to like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff. It's super helpful to the channel and keeping it going. And next week, I'll be back tackling the new James Bond movie, and I also have a press screening for Dune, so I'm looking forward to discussing that movie as well. But thanks again for watching, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.